In this interview, I meet up with Brian Scrone, a leading expert in single-family real estate investment industry, an international best-selling author and sought-after speaker. Success for Brian is spread of love and always be serving. Let's welcome Brian. Thank you, Brian, for coming in and sharing your expertise here today with me.
Yeah, honored to have the time with you and your audience.
Thank you. So I wanted to start by asking you, you say in your book and other places that you hit rock bottom before you developed a system, right? And how did you develop a system from a state that you were in? Because it's hard to do anything in that state.
You're absolutely correct. And just for the listeners and for everybody and myself included, I don't have it all figured out today as I sit here. Yes, I wrote a book and I have a couple successful businesses, and I feel like I'm doing a really good job as a father and a husband and a friend, but I certainly don't have it figured out. So I think it's really important to lay that foundation for the listeners, because we all have this, people get put up on pedestals sometimes. I mean, I do it. I'm sure everybody does it. So it's definitely been a process working out of the funk that I put myself into, that I talked about in the book. And I'm learning every day. One thing that really helped me sort of go in the right direction and continue in that direction is having mentors. And I'm a student for life. I've been in personal development for 25 years. My main business is real estate investments,
Yeah.
but I've always from day one invested in myself. And the theme for the talk today is to parent yourself first, for the parents that are listening there. And
Mhm.
it sounds so almost cliche and commonsensical to say, well, you can only give what you got. But I think as parents, because there's so much emotion and we have so much attachment and we have so much protection and love and nurturing and all the emotions up and down. I mean, I was on a roller coaster today with my kids because I'm not feeling 100%. And, there's just a lot of energy. So I think the takeaway is or the simple answer is that it's a process, not an event. And, for the parents, new parents or parents that are struggling, forgive yourself, laugh at yourself, and remember, perfect doesn't exist.
Yeah, it never does. Yeah, you can just try to be, right? But
Yeah.
it's a hard place for parents right now, like the whole world for them, especially with kids, right? When it comes to the education, and that's kind of what the summit's intention is, to help them and to find the right place to send their kids in
Yeah.
September, right?
Yeah, I know. I mean, to be candid with you, my wife and I just talked about it this afternoon. Like, our children are in a public Montessori system here, and then we travel in the winter to Puerto Rico and put them in a Spanish immersion in Puerto Rico in a
Yes.
Waldorf environment. And
Hmm.
we have no idea if that's going to be an option in 2021 because, I mean, Florida, where we live, is having some serious problems with COVID. And, we don't know if it's going to be virtual, if it's going to be, we don't know. There's this big question mark, which as parents is no fun.
Yes, yes, yes. That's what the summit is all about, exploring other ways of how education might look like, or how might it fit, how might it look like for your family, right? As well, because it's
Yeah.
everybody's different.
Yeah. And I mean, the example of us getting on the internet, you're in Canada, I'm in Florida. I mean, the internet is a beautiful, and technology is a beautiful tool. Now, if you don't have healthy boundaries around it, it can create a lot of problems in a family environment because there's a
Yes,
lot of addiction with,
yes,
electronics and gaming and all that.
yep.
So I think it's just creating rules, just like we do for ourselves. And we have to take control of the situation, especially with our children in an environment where there's so much uncertainty. I mean, day to day, if you watch, I don't watch the news, but even through social media, you see headlines popping up here and there, and you see people commenting, and there's a lot of uncertainty right now. So I think
Yeah.
it's the most important time to take the time for yourself, make sure that you're healthy, make sure that you're always trying to respond versus react to your children,
Mhm.
which again is a lot easier said than done, and I'm constantly working on that. But you have to be peaceful with yourself, or it's just not gonna go well with the kids.
Yes, yes, exactly. I want to ask about what is your 5F system? What is that?
Yeah. Yeah, so the 5 F's comes from, I touched on it earlier. I had a business mentor from way back when I was getting started in business 25 years ago. So this is the mid 90s, and a hotel room in Austin, Texas with a guy named Keith Cunningham, who is now, I don't know if you know his name, but he runs the business mastery side of Tony Robbins events.
Okay.
So he's a really, really
Good.
sought after name, like a
Mhm.
best in the industry at business. But he had a beautiful, simple way of communicating and teaching. And he's the one that actually introduced me to the 5F. So I always like to give credit where credit is due.
Okay.
And to be candid, he said it 25 years ago in a meeting that we were at in Austin, and I wrote it down, and I remember thinking about it for about 30 seconds, and then I was on to the next, task that we were
Mhm.
talking about. And I wasn't a parent at the time, so it was, timing is everything. So
Mhm.
I went through the 2008 crisis with the global financial crisis in real estate, and that was very, very stressful.
Mhm.
And that's where that part of that rock bottom where I needed some help. I needed a system, and the way I was going, which was very reactionary on a daily basis, just wasn't sustainable. I wasn't a happy person.
Mhm.
So I went to my notes, I looked at them, I called him. I spent a lot of time in silence. I think that, you find a lot of
Mhm.
answers when you're quiet.
Yes.
Yeah, which can be very uncomfortable in the beginning. I mean, I started meditation and yoga 25 years ago. So now it's just part of my lifestyle. But I remember it was doing the opposite of what I wanted it to. It was creating more anxiety from me because I wasn't comfortable sitting with myself in the beginning.
Yeah.
And sometimes today, even today, you go through bumps and bruises, but I think the underlying theme is you have to take care of yourself, and then all that internal relationship with yourself, which is faith in the first of the 5 F's, um, will lay the foundation and the depth and the richness of those external relationships of the other 4 F's, which happen to be fitness,
Mhm.
which is, relationship with your body, family, friends, and then finance. And then there's a,
Mhm.
a bonus F of fun, because if you're not having fun throughout all those relationships, then none of it's sustainable.
No, it's not. Yeah. That's the name of the game, right? Fun.
Yeah, yeah. So I compartmentalize my days, Kohila, into those 5 categories.
Wow.
But then obviously there's a very natural flow to things. So to give you an example of what do I mean by that? So for fitness, which I try to be very conscious of my fitness and moving on a daily basis. So I use the ocean. I'm a surfer. I do a lot of long distance training in the ocean. But
Nice.
with that, I also get a really solid faith foundation, because for me, the ocean is where I go, what I would call my church, or for my family, we spend a lot of time in Mother Nature.
Mhm.
I've done a lot of business with clients in the ocean. I've made friendships in the ocean. I take
Mhm.
my kids surfing with me. My wife is a surfer. So
Nice.
you compartmentalize into the 5 F's, but then there absolutely has to be a flow to it, which is, I think, a natural progression of life.
Mhm. Beautiful. Nice. That's
Yeah.
amazing. You said there was the 2008 crisis, right? We're kind of even worse right now in 2020, right? So that's why, when I saw and read and heard about you, like I thought this would be a perfect fit, because I think everybody, one of us need this balance right now, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and it's the timing is amazing for us to have the interview, because my wife and I had a long discussion today. We're contemplating purchasing a new primary home for our family, which
Mm,
is a big decision. There's financial decisions, there's schools to consider, there's
sure.
all kinds of moving parts. So because we're going through the COVID crisis right now, and I'm in the real estate business as a core business. When I went through 2008, I was using the banks and getting loans and investor loans very aggressively to build my portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of staff and a lot of fixed overhead. I was doing the classic, trying to keep up with the Joneses and living above my means.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went through a very hard time through that crisis in 2008. And it taught me a lot about, the difference between having a respect for money, and also the difference between respect and having an abundant mentality around money, because
Mm-hmm.
there's a very clear difference in my opinion. Um, and so I went through that and learned a lot. And then fast forward to today in 2020, now we're in the midst of another now global pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
which I said to my wife just literally 3 hours ago when we were looking at a piece of real estate. I said, if we didn't go through what we did back then and really learn about money and leverage and living below your means, and what we call getting out of the rat race, which is a real simple way of saying our passive income outweighs our overhead, or what it costs for me to run my family and my businesses.
Mhm.
And so today I feel very, very fortunate after 25 years of, blood, sweat, and tears that we're at a position where I'm not stressed about, from a financial perspective anyway, about COVID and the crisis that's happening. People are losing their businesses. People are losing their homes. There's 30 million plus people out of work, which is really going to impact the real estate. Yeah, absolutely. But the model that I've set up with that, and because I'm not aggressive with leverage, meaning getting big loans on pieces of property, we're trying to live in an all cash environment where we had a big portfolio and lots of leverage. And I, over the last few years, spent a lot of time and energy selling that down and then taking that cash and having a very small, very select portfolio that has no debt on it. So now fast forward, here we are in July of 2020 in the midst of a unprecedented crisis, and I'm not feeling, from a financial perspective, I feel no stress, to be honest with you.
That's good.
I'm very compassionate and empathetic to the people that lost their businesses, because I almost went through bankruptcy in 2008.
Mhm.
So I think the takeaway or the lesson for the listeners is while it's great to have an awesome work ethic, I grew up in New York and New Jersey where work ethic was just a foundation of my childhood.
Mhm.
I think it's even more important to learn how to work smart versus hard.
Yeah.
You can always work hard, but that's not sustainable forever.
Mhm.
And so if you can understand the game of money and how it works, and I can share some cool tools if you'd like on how to do that, gamifying and keeping it fun. For an example,
Mhm.
for a tool, it's called Cash Flow for Kids. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No, not me. Yeah, but
Yeah,
some.
yeah. How old are your children?
Mine's 13. I have to ask him. I don't know if I don't think he plays that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it's a game for parents to play with the kids as a family is
Oh, okay.
and it'll teach everyone at the table a lot about assets and liabilities and return on investment, which are very foundational money principles that have never been taught in the traditional educational system. So
Mm.
it's nobody's fault because no one's ever taught it to them, right? So yeah, I highly, highly recommend it. It's a simple board game. I mean, get it on Amazon. It's called Cash Flow for Kids. I don't know if you've heard of Rich Dad Poor Dad,
Yep.
Kiyosaki, pretty
Yep.
famous platform. He's the creator of that game, and actually my original mentor, Keith Cunningham, that I mentioned earlier, that introduced me to the 5Fs, had a big part in creating that whole
Nice.
Cash
Yeah.
Flow for Kids movement. So yeah, that's a real fun tool.
Okay, cool. I will check it out because we read the book as a family. That one, the
Uh,
Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Yeah, my son actually read it already.
Yeah,
So.
if your son's 13, he's just in a sweet spot to
Oh,
really he'll understand the game in one or two rounds, and you guys will have a bunch of fun.
nice.
He will walk away. To give you a very tangible example of how powerful the game is. Um, in the past, we've put on, I talked about personal development, so we put on parent-child retreats, and we had a very successful entrepreneur and his daughter who happened to be a senior in a MBA program or economic finance program at a very prestigious college, right? So they came,
Mm-hmm.
it was summertime, and they came to one of our events, and she's about to graduate with an MBA, I think it was an MBA in finance. Um, and we played a couple rounds of the game throughout the weekend, and she came to us. Actually, she stood up in front of the whole room, and I'll never forget the look on her father's face, because he probably just spent, I don't know, $500,000 in education for his daughter.
Yeah.
And she said, you know what? I learned more playing this game in the last 2 nights than I have in the last 4 years of going through
Wow.
it. So, I mean, that's a very tangible example of the power of
Wow.
gamifying and learning how money works. If it's not fun, it's not sustainable. Like I said earlier, it has to be fun, or people are, especially teenagers. I mean, the attention span of a teenager is not going to hold on unless it's fun.
Yeah.
So that's a really cool tool. And that has been the foundation of how I've built my real estate portfolio. It's very, very simple. It really comes down to seventh grade math and understanding how, rental property works and passive income. And then really the most important thing is the relationships and the people that you have on your team. And so for the parents and for anyone that's listening to this in the future, I think everyone knows how important your relationships are. I mean, that's what my whole book is about, those 5
Mhm.
relationships. And so that's a big part of my business, is just making sure that I'm surrounding myself with really, really solid people.
Mhm. Yes, even in learning, any learning, gamification is so important for kids, right? Otherwise, you lose their attention
And
very
not
quickly.
and to be honest with you, Kohila, for parents too.
Yes.
Let's be honest.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm,
I'll
I'm,
go. Yeah.
I'm self-diagnosed ADD all the way. I mean, I've never gone to a doctor and been told that, but I guarantee if I went to an MD, they would tell me that, hey, you got some serious ADD. But I've learned to channel it, and it's
Yes.
become it's either a crisis or an opportunity. So I try to always see everything, the glass half
Mm,
full.
that's very good. Can you give us how parents can put your five F's into practice so they
Yeah,
don't hit the rock bottom? Because, there's a chance that this crisis could make a lot of people, go under depression even, right? Parents, right? Yeah.
yeah,
And kids too. Yeah.
absolutely. And I've been there, so I can definitely speak from experience. So because I'm a very simple person, but also a very tangible person, I'd love to share 5 simple tools for the listeners, one from each of those 5 relationships.
Okay.
And they're going to sound almost overly simple and almost like, come on, Brian, come up with something better. But I can guarantee you from experience and dealing with some of the most successful, quote unquote, successful people in the world, people like Keith Cunningham, who's on Tony Robbins' stage. It doesn't really get in that
Mhm.
space any more successful than that.
Yeah.
So let's start with faith, right? And the tool with faith is to take a step back from that. In the book, I talk about self-love and the ability to forgive oneself in the beginning of the book. And then
Mhm.
the second half of the book, I go into the 5 F's, because self-love and forgiveness doesn't sound very tangible. It sort of sounds like it's woo-woo, and
Mhm.
it's like, yeah,
Mhm.
that sounds great, Brian, but how does it work, right? So
Mhm.
how it works for me, and for a lot of successful people before me, that I didn't create any of this. I've just taken tools from really smart people that tripped up and hit their heads before me, and then I put my own little personal tweak on it. So the
Yeah.
first one in faith is, again, this has nothing to do with dogma or religion.
Okay.
When I say faith, I mean self-love and the ability to laugh at yourself when you screw up, because you're going to screw up every day.
Mhm.
um, and then the tool is just a simple meditation. And I know that can sound, again, a little bit woo-woo for some of the listeners. I was raised in a Roman Catholic environment, so I was raised in a very dogmatic environment, and that didn't
Mhm.
work for me. So I think I'll call it meditation, and there's so many tools out there. The tool that I share in the book is called Simply Being. I'm not affiliated with them. It's a $2 or $3 app that you can download on your phone. I still use it 20, I don't know how many years I've been using it, at least a couple decades, called Simply Being.
Okay.
Self-guided meditation. You can have a 5, 10, 15, 20, or 30-minute session.
Mhm.
So I would strongly suggest that if you don't have a practice, do not even try and go into the 15, 20, and 30-minute sessions, because you're just going to get frustrated.
Mhm.
Start with the 5 minutes. And if that's overwhelming, then start with 1 minute.
Mhm.
And let that woman, that angelic voice in that woman, just sort of guide you through. And she says some really poignant and loving, wisdom-filled words in the self-guided meditation.
Mhm.
And you will start, it'll be very uncomfortable in the beginning, but you will, just like anything, they call it a practice for a reason. You'll start to crave it. Like, I'm at a point now where if I don't get it, then I can feel myself getting a little fidgety, and then I'll go for a walk to the beach. You got to have quiet space for the parents. If you have young children, get a babysitter, take turns, do whatever you have to do to give yourself the space. Get up a half hour earlier before your kids get up. Um, and give yourself on a daily basis, and especially from my perspective in the morning, a really good way to set a tone for the day.
Mhm.
And you will see remarkable gifts and differences that will come from that. So
Mhm.
that's the gift for faith. The next one is fitness. I think that there is a crisis in the United States right now. I mean, relating back to COVID, since that's current, obesity is one of the major problems with COVID. The people that
Mhm.
are dying are the people that are not in shape and that are
Yeah.
obese. And so, to keep things sustainable and simple again, the tool that I share in the book for around fitness is to find something that you absolutely enjoy and crave and have fun doing. So for me, that's surfing. I don't go to the gym every day. I live in Florida, and we have beautiful year-round weather. So I go outside and I get in the ocean, or I get in the river and I swim, or I paddle, or I surf. And so for me, that's, again, just part of my lifestyle. And if I don't get it, then I feel myself again getting fidgety. So I just go and do it. And then it takes care of so many problems. All your problems go away when you're moving. So
Mhm.
if you live in Canada and it's cold, not 8, 9, 10 months out of the year, then maybe it's indoor hot yoga, or maybe it's dance, or you fill in the blank. I'm not here to tell you what
Yeah,
to pick.
perfect. Yeah.
Ice hockey for the Canadians.
Yes, yes.
um, but do it, and because it's fun, you won't stop doing it. I mean, I can tell you there's very few days in the entire year where I'm not moving, because I go to the ocean to do it because it's fun for me.
Yeah.
And again, I know this sounds overly simple, Kohila, but I'm just taking from experience and from some of the smartest people these simple tools.
Mhm.
So the next one, let's move to family.
Family. Yep.
And I know that's a really big focus for
Yeah.
today. I'm going to take an extra minute on this one because I know that's the focus of the platform here
Mhm.
today. So to try and distill it down, because I could talk about this for days, and I've taught
Yes.
3-day classes on this. What I want to talk about, I'm going to call them simple dates or overnights with your loved one. So let's take the example in a family environment of a parent and a child. So just like we do in business, I'm a business owner. We have, board of directors and our investors and people that we need to answer to on a regular basis. So you have these quarterly meetings, right? Or weekly meetings or monthly meetings, however you're set up. So why in the world would we not do that with our most precious assets, our children, right? So
Yep.
it's just taking something that you may or may not already be doing regularly and
Yep.
putting some structure around it. And the structure is the game changer. So I call them overnights or board meetings. You can call them whatever you want.
And yeah.
But I'm going to give you a couple rules here that are absolutely critical to make this sustainable and successful. So I've been doing it. I'm a young father. I have a 7 and an 8-year-old. My 8-year-old's about to turn 9. Since the day they were born, so before they were even verbal, and I remember being a nervous wreck in the beginning doing this because I'm a new parent and holding an infant, and my wife's going back to work, and I'm thinking, what am I doing? I'm sweating and a nervous wreck. But that one-on-one time, it's got to be one-on-one. So if you're a parent with multiple children, I always like to joke and say, pick your favorite child and start with them. And you're gonna do 3 things with them. You're gonna grab them, and grab your calendars. Everyone's got a smartphone in today's day and age, depending on the
Mhm.
age of your children. And you're gonna block off a day on your calendar. Or if it's overwhelming for you to do that, then start with 4 hours. Give yourself a half a day with your child. Again, to remind you, you do this for your investors or your coworkers. Why would we not do this for our most precious asset, which is our children, right?
Yeah.
You block the calendar. You tell them that you're going to have this time together. It gets them very excited. It shows them, without even doing the date, it gets them excited, something to look forward to. It also sends a message that, hey, son or daughter, I love you, and I can't wait to have some one-on-one time with you, because we're living in a chaotic world with all the distractions. So block the calendar, turn electronics off. I said earlier, electronics and technology are a gift, but they're also a curse if you don't have rules around it.
Yeah.
So this is time for you to focus one-on-one with your child, no electronics. I always recommend getting outside. Again, if you live in Canada and it's February, bundle up and go somewhere.
Yeah.
Go for a walk
There's
in a
always a
park.
place.
There's never an excuse not to go outside.
Yeah.
Um, And then all it is a fun date with your kid. This isn't complicated, guys. It's just having one-on-one time. There is a
Nice.
radical difference in the energy and conversation and environment between you and your child versus you, your child, your spouse, your child's best friend, and the next door neighbor. And there's so many distractions. So really simple, but very, very powerful. And I've been doing it since day one, since the kids were, not even verbal and brand new infants. And I remember even saying to my wife and being not skeptical, but I was scared and nervous and anxious as a new father. And they don't even understand what I'm saying, I said to her. And she said, don't you worry, they do. And the connection that I have with them is pretty special. I can say that humbly. Um, and so we do it regularly now. And now it's gone, I started my wife went back to work part-time when we had babies. So I started with like a half a day, then it
Mhm.
was a full day. And now I do a full 24 hours, I say, but reality is I actually take my kids on one trips every 6 months or so. So I rotate. I only have 2 kids, so it's pretty easy for us. My
Easy.
wife, my wife takes one and I take the other. And we
Mhm.
do, we do special trips. And, you know, You don't need to have a bunch of money to do this. This could be something as simple with Airbnb today. You could spend $50 on a room in a house somewhere and just go have one-on-one time with your
Mm.
child, and keep it fun and keep it light. And then the one thing to wrap up that tool is at the end of the date. So grab a meal, grab a coffee. If it's an older child, grab a beer with them,
Mhm.
and not in a very formal way, because you still want it to be fun and to flow. Couple of questions. Hey, son or daughter, really enjoyed our time. Let's make this a regular habit. And so you have to do it each quarter with each child. What's the one thing that you learned about me today? What's the one thing that you learned about you today? And what's
Mm.
the one thing that I could do for you as a parent to make our relationship deeper and more meaningful to you?
Beautiful.
So that's the simple tool. I call them overnights. You can call them board meetings. You can call them dates, call them whatever you want.
Mm.
It sounds so simple, Kahila, but it's
Yeah.
truly and honestly a magic pill. The one-on-one is so special. And now my kids are, 7 and 8 years later, we crave it and we get excited and we create these
Yeah.
trips together and this time together.
Yeah, it is absolutely because I'm not my culturally I was in a I'm not like we usually spend time always together as a family. When I got married to my husband, he would always say at that time I didn't get what he was saying, but now he would say I have to go out with my son or daughter alone. Like, I didn't get it in the beginning for me because cultures
Well,
different cultures, right? Because some cultures they hang out together always, but I now know that what's the importance of going alone.
yeah,
I understand that really
it,
clearly. Yeah.
it's a magic pill. It really is. And I can relate because I grew up in an Italian Irish household where there was always 35 people in my house and
Yeah.
just chaos everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Which is beautiful, right? I mean, it's organized, it's loving chaos, right? It's surrounded
Yeah.
by family and friends, which human connection at the end of the day is what this is all about. But that one-on-one is something special. So that's the tool around family.
Hmm.
I could go on for days about that, but to move on through the 5 F's, the next one is friends.
Yes.
And I steal this one from one of my mentors, Jim Rohn. I don't know if you've heard of Jim Rohn. He's pretty famous. He's passed
Hmm.
on a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
but I talk about it in depth in the book. It's called The Rule of Five. So for the listeners that have never heard of the Rule of Five, Jim Rohn states that, and they've done scientific research on this, that the 5 people that you invest your most physical time with on a daily basis, like pick an average day, who are the 5 people that you're surrounded with? And this is outside of family for the listeners. So who are the 5 friends that we're focused on friends right now that you're investing the most time with, whether it's on the phone or physically or whatever that looks like in your life? Write down those 5 names and then realize that you are going to become the sum average of those 5 people that you have written on that piece of paper. So the rub here becomes many times, and I know when I did this 15, 20 years ago for the first time, I looked at that list and they were some mostly childhood friends from New Jersey where I grew up. And this is no disrespect to any of them, and I'm no better than them, but there was a couple names on that list that were toxic, to be candid with you. I mean,
Hmm.
I talk about it in the book and getting into all kinds of trouble with the police and drugs and drinking, and I won't go into that detail now. But I had to look at that and continue to love those friends, but with a very healthy boundary. So a couple of those names got crossed off, not to put them, not to not in a non-loving way. You can do it in a
Yeah.
very loving way. You can have a nice conversation with them and just start to create some boundary,
Yes.
and then
Space.
really be hyper focused on, well, okay, well, so if I'm not going to invest time in those 2 people, then who would I love as a perfect role model? Who's going to energize me and fulfill me, and who adds value to my life as a friend? And it's got to reciprocate, right? It's got to go both ways. So today I'm very blessed to be crystal clear on who those 5 people are in my life. They know it. I've done handwritten letters to them to explain to them how important they are. And that's also a tool around friendship, and an old handwritten letter is amazing. But the rule of 5 is a powerful thing. And especially like when I think about your son at 13, it's your son, right?
Yes.
That is a really transitional age. He's going through puberty. He's probably about to go into high school if he hasn't already.
Yeah.
So a whole new environment he's going to be dealing with. That tool can completely, absolutely change the trajectory of your child's life and your life as well. So this isn't
Hmm.
just do it for yourself, but also share this tool. You could teach that tool after hearing me say it. You could go and teach it on any stage in the world,
Yes.
because it's so, so simple, but so, so true. And
Powerful.
yeah, I love that one.
Mm-hmm.
And then finance is the last F, because you asked, what do parents do in this chaotic time? So
Yes.
I could, again, talk for days about money and finance, because I'm a professional investor as a career.
Yeah.
I would say, to simplify, how can you, in the world that you're living in today, get your money and other people's money working for you versus you working for your money?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I know that sounds very, very simple. So in my business, I have a sales model to my business. So I sell investments to my clients.
Yeah.
That's trading time for money. I'm very aware of that. I'm
Yeah.
very conscious of it. I know about what my hourly rate would be, which is really good because I've been doing it a long time.
Yeah.
But I do that because I enjoy it, and I want to help my clients and investors create that freedom of time through real estate, which is just the tool that I happen to choose, so that they can go and have a freedom of time and be able to enjoy their family and their friends. The
Mm-hmm.
problem is that when you are in chaos mode and you're trying to figure out how to pay the light bill and the mortgage, and you can't keep up with the bills and the credit cards and everything's piling up, you cannot be creative. You cannot be calm. So my challenge to the listeners is, I don't care where you're at in your financial world right now. I don't care if you're sitting on a bunch of debt right now, that's
Mm-hmm.
where you need to focus. There's a phenomenal book called The Richest Man in Babylon. Write that down. You can read it in about an hour. Um, and they break down how to get out of debt and live below your means. And I can always do a follow-up call on that if you like, because again, that's sort of not a complicated conversation, but
Longer.
it's a longer conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But there's good debt and there's bad debt. In the real estate world, it's mostly good debt if you understand what you're investing in.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have, that's where the rubber meets the road in me saying, getting other people's money to work for you versus you working for your money. Because
Mm-hmm.
God forbid something happens to you. Say you walk down the road and you break your leg and you're in a physical labor job and you can't go to work.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to create some stress really, really quick on you. You have this thing called COVID that breaks out, which nobody saw coming last March. And people now have lost their businesses. There's 35 million people out of work. There's a lot of stress around finance right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so take control of your finances and really ask yourself, and I happen to use real estate. I think it's the best asset class in the world. Some people do stocks and bonds. I just love the simplicity of real estate. I love the tangibility of it. You can rent it when, even in a bad market, you can still rent it and hopefully cover, your expenses on it. And then let your tenants pay down the mortgage for you. And now you have a free and clear asset, which is where, fast forward after 25 years of doing it, where I've just simplified my life and just have a
Mm-hmm.
small, very select portfolio that's free and clear, so that if I walk out the door today and break both my legs, I don't need to continue with my sales business. I'm doing that because I'm passionate about service and helping
Mm-hmm.
people. So it's a really, really humbling and powerful position to be in, where you don't have to go to work. Your expenses are already covered. Do you follow?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
again, I know this it sounds very simple, but it takes time, it takes discipline, it takes persistence. But I can guarantee every listener on the phone that I am probably the simplest person that's on this call right now. I'm not an intellect. I come from a very simple background, but I understand money really well in the game of it and how it works. So I'd be,
Yeah.
again, honored to talk about that on a separate call.
Yeah. It's also, you said it earlier, it's about not working harder but smarter, right? Like with money, it's you have to really feel that.
Yeah, I mean, our educational system, and I don't want to beat up the educational system, because there's lots of
It's good
pros
in
and
it.
cons. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's lots of beauty in it, right? I mean, it's where your most important relationships are probably going to be created as your childhood friends in school. But I am not bashful about saying that some of the fundamental lessons that are being taught are archaic, and they're not right for the times that we're raising our children in. And
Yeah.
to be candid, they're not right for us. I mean, the system was created in an industrial time, and we're living
Yeah.
in a technological and an informational age. So, it's like
There's
putting
a
a
gap.
yeah,
There's a gap.
there's absolutely a timing gap and a congruency gap in what's needed for our children to best serve them. So Money can be fun. Play that game. Read Rich
Yeah.
Dad Poor Dad. Read Richest Man in Babylon. I'd be honored and humbled if you read my book, because I take those tools from those really smart people and I really distill them down so that
Yes.
I wrote that book so that my 10-year-old nephew could understand it, and he does, and we talk about it.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good to curate stuff, right? Like it's like you don't have to go it all the way, all of like that five things are the most fundamental, right? To the
Yeah.
life. Yeah.
And for the listeners, don't be overwhelmed by what I just shared. Just start with one. Just pick one.
Yeah.
Because we're all struggling. Like, I have a really simple tool in the book, and you can go to my website and download it for free. It's a 15-minute exercise where you look at those 5 relationships. I ask you to prioritize them to start.
Mm.
Put a 1 next to the most important F and put a 5 next to the least important. And that don't judge yourself. Just take 5 minutes to do that. And then on the other side of the paper, I ask you to be brutally honest with yourself and say, okay, if you're saying, for example, family is number 1 out of the 5 F's, which I'm not here to judge or tell you what's right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, on a daily basis, how much time, how many minutes or hours on an average day are you actually hyper focused on family? So again, speaking from experience, I only speak from experience when I'm teaching. I created this tool, my wife and I did together, again, 10 years ago, and there was a complete congruency gap. I had to call bullshit on myself and say, wait a minute, I can't say in integrity that family's number 1 if I'm spending 5 minutes of quality time a day with my family and I'm working 8 or 10 hours a day. And, so the lesson there is the tool will shine a light on where there's a congruency gap, right? And it'll
Mm-hmm.
tell you, you need to spend more time on family or fitness or whatever that is for you. Again, I'm not here to
Awesome.
prescribe anything. So that's a really cool tool. And then just pick one thing. Don't overwhelm yourself. I gave you all kinds of things to think about, but they're all very simple, tangible tools, and you can start to slowly incorporate them into your daily practices. And then I humbly tell you that you're going to have, good results, and you'll see some dramatic changes if you stick to those things.
Yeah, yeah, powerful for sure. It's all important. All
Yeah.
5 are important. The children can sense parents' worries and fears, right? Right now, we're all under, most of us are, right? How can parents make sure that the family is successful without compromising any of the areas of life? Like,
Be brutally honest with your children.
really? Really?
Yeah, I don't speak any, and some, I grew up in a, I guess, quote unquote, rougher environment, New York City, people
Mm-hmm.
are known to have a little bit of edge to them,
Yeah.
New Jersey. So I don't, I've gotten feedback from people that, family and friends that hear how I talk in front of my children, and it's what works for me. I'm just being authentic, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I swear, Kohila, can you believe that? Sometimes I actually swear.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to hold back my emotions and how I'm feeling about a certain situation because my 7-year-old happens to be standing in the same room. So I think as parents, a lot of times, and it comes from a loving place, we try to protect the children, and, we don't want them to see us cry, or we
Mm-hmm.
don't want them to hear us say a really bad word, or we don't want them to hear about how in 2008 we went through a crisis and we're talking to bankruptcy attorneys. And in my case, I was going to jail when I was a teenager because I was acting completely out of integrity and got into all kinds of trouble. My 7 and 8-year-old know all about that. I don't hide anything from them. And some people might not agree with that, but it works for me. And I think just being brutally honest with our children, because here it is, at the end of the day, children are so intuitive. And if you're trying to snowball or BS or not tell the whole story,
Mm-hmm.
I talk about trust, and the trust is the root of all harmony, I mentioned in the book, which comes from Dalai Lama. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so if you break trust with your children, it's not going to, the relationship's going to have a lot. You can love them and they can love you, but if there's a lack of trust,
There's a gap.
there's going to be a gap. And that goes for intimate relationships with our spouses,
Mm-hmm.
friendships, our relationship as parent and child. So I think just being brutally honest with them, and always coming from a loving, nurturing place. I'm not talking about being obnoxious with your children, but I
Mm-hmm.
would say be yourself. Don't hide things from them. Let them know if things are good or bad. And it's remarkable, even at 7 and 8 years old, how intelligent the responses are that I get from my children.
Sometimes you can teach lessons within those by sharing them, right? It brings
Absolutely.
conversations, right, with your kids.
Well, they're going to learn from experience, not from theory.
Yes.
right? I
Yes.
mean, the best way to learn is to get your hands dirty and hear what, older people went through and what did they learn from it. And so I'm an open book with the kids, and maybe sometimes a little bit too open according to some people, but hey, it works for us. And one thing I'll say about parenting, and I taught and counseled for years before I went into real estate years ago,
Mhm.
and I even have in my notes in preparing for the call, stability, I think, is the most important thing. So
Yeah.
again, not sugarcoating things. And, my kids know that there's certain things like rules that we have in my household, rules that we have when they're at school around friendships. And so they're going to get almost the same response from me all the time. So I know, as an example, growing up with my father, who I love dearly and respect and have a beautiful friendship with today, um, there was no stability with him. I could do one thing in the house
Mm.
Tuesday, and I'd get no response. And I would do the same exact thing on Wednesday, and he would blow up and scream, and it would turn into a big heat.
Mm. Inconsistent.
Yeah, consistency, stability. Kids want that stability, and they crave and need that structure. So I think
That's the
it's just,
basis of trust, right? That's what builds trust, because they know my dad will react like this all the time because that's what he does, right? Otherwise, I'll be very fearful. Okay, now should I tell this? Then they start hiding too, right? If you
yeah,
don't give them that consistency.
yeah. And then the communication breaks down, and then it's just a snowball effect. And that's how families go like this, right? So,
Mhm.
and as a young parent, our kids, it's a quote from Dr. Laura Markham. I don't know if you've ever heard her, but that's another great, phenomenal resource for your listeners. Um,
What was the name of it?
Dr. Laura Markham.
Okay.
And the name of, if you Google her, she's a New York Times bestselling, so she's going to come up right away. I think the name of the book, because it's been a few years, is Peaceful Parent, Happy Child. I'm almost positive that's what it is.
Okay.
But she has some brilliant one-liners in there for the listeners. And my wife and I are always walking around and reminding ourselves of her wisdom. Our children need our love when they least deserve it, right? So
Mhm.
2 hours ago, I find myself repeating myself a lot with my 7 and 8 year old. They're boys. They have a lot of energy. We're driving around in the car. Um, and so they need our love when they least deserve it. And that's just a really good reminder of always trying to respond versus react. It's very difficult not to react to your child when you just told them 4 times not to do something and they continue to
Mhm.
do it, right?
Yep.
But discipline, or what perceived like a tantrum or a child acting out is which this is what she talks about, and I love her the way she puts it, is that's not an attitude problem with the child. That's not a discipline problem. That's actually a relationship problem.
Mm.
It's the child's way of telling you, as the parent who they're looking to for guidance, that, hey, I don't feel safe, or hey, this doesn't feel right, or whatever the situation may be, you fill in the blank. But it's just a really, really simple way, I think, as a guide for parents to, number one, remember that our kids need our love when they least deserve it. So that's a really hard one as a parent sometimes. And number two, if they are acting out, take a step back and don't respond, but react and realize that it's a disconnect between your energy and your child's energy. And they might not be telling you with their words, but they're telling you through their actions that they need to be loved at that time. And I
Mhm.
have a 7 and 8 year old. It doesn't really matter how old your child is. You could be an elderly parent with an adult child. Same scenario. I mean, I had these conversations with my parents who were 82 and 79 years old, right? So
Mhm.
really, really good resource. Dr. Shafali, who's a personal friend,
Mhm.
is a phenomenal resource in conscious parenting. I'm sure you've heard of her.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just texting back and forth with her a couple days ago. Really, there's so many great tools out there, but at the end of the day, parent yourself first, love yourself first,
Mhm.
forgive yourself first, laugh at yourself, have fun with it, have fun with your kids. I mean, one thing that we do really consistently in my household is laugh a lot. I
Yes.
think we forget sometimes how to have fun, right? I mean, the world gets so chaotic, and especially in today's environment with COVID, and people losing work and losing their houses. And at the end of the day, it's all relative. As long as you love on your kids and you love on yourself,
Yeah.
everything else is going to sort itself out.
Yes. One of the things that I do in my, I'm a math coach. I train a
Yeah.
lot of students who hates math. Like they come to me the last resource when they want to fix the problem, right? One of the things I do is involve fun and gamification for them because they already hate it. they're going to hate it if I teach it the same way as they are learning it somewhere else, right? That's the first thing. So how do you make them love it or want to do it, right? So that's my therapy, is to switch up that
You
game,
know
bring
what,
in gamification. Yeah.
Karen, I'll follow up with you here in a month or two, and if you incorporate that game of cash flow for kids into
Yeah, I'm
families,
going to look at it.
it'll be a game changer.
Perfect. Perfect. Yes. Yes. Yeah. We do. I do play. I mean, I have one call that I have a program that's called, because of the gap in what we teach our kids and what's needed in life. I have math for life, I call it, which is everything that you will ever, kind of the math you will ever use in life. You know, we learn calculus and trig and stuff, but they're like, I'm not going to use this ever. When am I going to figure out tan and cos? It doesn't matter, right? So they always ask me. So I said, okay, let's do math for life. Like, you know, let's buy a car or rent a place. You know, how much is it going to be? Do you have enough money if you work at McDonald's or whatever, right? So I actually go through that with them when they're ready to graduate, or around grade 11 and 12 when they ask me, can you
Yeah.
show me something that I will ever use? Okay, let's do it. So I will put that in that game with it as well.
Yeah, that's exactly what that game teaches. It teaches them, like my 7-year-old, I could call him from the back of the house right now and ask him what assets and liabilities are and
Nice.
return on investment. And
Nice.
I mean, there's most adults wouldn't know how to answer that, Kohila, and it's
Oh,
it's no blame or reflection on the adult's intelligence. It's they've never been talked to about that. So how would they know it? It's like Greek, right?
yeah, yeah, it's
So
different.
yeah, just
There's
takes
a gap in,
fundamentals of money and makes it fun.
yeah, very, very important. So your book is called
What matters most?
Most. So what does matter most?
Well, that's the beauty. I'm not here to prescribe anything. So the subtitle of the book is called What Matters Most. The subtitle is Finding Your Focus Using the 5 F's.
Okay,
So
awesome.
those 5 relationships we talked about. And
Yeah,
I'm not here to prescribe anything. I don't have it all figured out. But the tools that are in there will shine a light on what area in your life needs some energy and focus.
yeah.
And then I give you those tangible tools and go into obviously much greater detail on the book about those tools that I
Perfect.
shared with you.
Perfect. Perfect. What is your advice for parents moving forward post COVID and beyond? I think you gave a little bit of it earlier, but what's your
Hey Zion, come here for a minute, buddy. I'm gonna I'm gonna get some help on this very, very powerful question.
nice? Thank you.
So
Hi.
this is Miss Kohila.
Hi.
Hi.
Can you say hi?
Hi.
And
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
she teaches
Aw.
math and numbers to people and makes it fun. You know, like cash flow for kids that we were talking about. So repeat the question that you asked, Kohila.
So I want to know, what is your advice for parents moving forward post COVID and beyond?
Self-love and forgiveness. 2 words, 3 words.
Mm. What would you say?
I don't know.
What are the 5 F's?
Faith, family, fitness, friends, and is there one more?
Yeah, around money. What do you call
Mm, finance.
it?
Awesome. You got it. Good. Great.
So yeah, to jokes aside, to answer your question, because
I
it's a
could get
all right, buddy.
Thank you.
See you, buddy. So, you know, I don't say that jokingly at all. I actually say that very, very seriously. In today's world, self-love can come across or look at as, or be perceived as a narcissistic thing or a selfish, self-centered thing.
Mhm.
I'm here to tell you that it's one of the most selfless things you can do is nurture and love on yourself on a daily basis and laugh at yourself when you screw up, because I screw up. Hey, Zion, I never screw up, right? I'm a perfect parent. We're all going to screw up on a moment-to-moment basis. We're all going to lose our temper. If we can keep it light and fun and laugh and ask for forgiveness from our children when we scream and blow up and lose our temper, because I still do that. Everyone will. And everyone does, and we always will. Honestly, Kohila, if you can take care of yourself, that's where the old parent yourself first theme comes from for this whole call. Honestly, the other things are going to take care of themselves. Your finance will, I'm not going to say you can't just ignore it and not pay attention to it, but it will lay a foundation for those other external relationships like I mentioned.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just putting the cart before the horse.
It's all pillars, right? These are pillars that makes it successful and have a balanced life, right? So
Yeah, that internal relationship is absolutely going to drive those other external relationships.
yes, absolutely right. You can't be empty inside and expect to give anything outward.
Yeah, and realize it's a process, not an event. Don't put all this pressure on yourself that you like. I mean, my wife would. So you guys know, I said to my wife, we were riding around earlier looking at homes, and I said, I'm going to need complete quiet in the house from 5 to 6 to do this interview. She's like, "Oh, what's it about?" And I said, it's about parenting. I'm a parenting expert, I guess, right?" And she looked at me like, "Are you kidding me?" She's like, "Do you want me to get on and tell them about you?" She was joking, of course, but you got like we laugh. I mean,
Yeah.
she catches me, I catch her. um, and it's it takes a village to raise a family. And so for the listeners and for the parents who might be struggling because of COVID or without COVID, we all struggle with parenting. It's probably the most humbling, rewarding job there is in the world.
Yeah.
Just take it light, take yourself light, surround yourself with good people. That rule of five is so important. If you
Yeah.
get around some other good parents, you're gonna lean on and nurture each other and lift each other up and give each other things to think about and enrich each other's lives. And don't forget to have fun along the way.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much, because I know what you do is not directly related to this, but you still said yes and came and. But what's most important is those 5 things are fundamental to everything we do, right? It doesn't matter what you're going to do with it. It's in everything you do, and that's what makes us all successful, I think. So thank you for all those ideas and tools and books. I will get all those links and I will provide it to the listeners so that they don't have to go looking for it. So thank you. And they hopefully they will read your book too, because it's important what's said in there, because you just gave a real brief about everything, right? But when they
Yeah,
read it, they'll get all of it.
yeah. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm always very humbled. Like I said earlier, I said to my
Okay.
wife, I'm being interviewed about parenting. Can you believe that? And we sort of giggled. But it's something that I take very, very seriously. I'm at a point in my life where there's a lot of my energy towards that, because our kids are only going to be this age and this young and under our roofs
They
for,
grow fast.
yeah, for, 18, 20 years. You have them and then they're off doing their own thing, right?
Still, I think the summit is for parents looking for optional education. If you want to tell your wife how your fits is, if you don't have, like, how I see it is, when I started off, I said, okay, let's do optional educational optional things and show them what are available: homeschooling, unschooling, deschooling, all those other stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as I look at everything holistically, even when I'm teaching, living holistically. And I noticed that if I just give them all these options and then they don't know how to be parent themselves, or financially they're stressed out, just taking on a homeschooling would not work, like,
I think it would do more damage, actually.
to everybody. So I didn't want to do it, like, get all these options for them, and they think, oh, I'll do it, but then all these other places. So I have brought in dietitians and nutritionists, as well as physical fitness people and people like you who are in the space of marketing and all the other places, so that they can see how well rounded that you need to be in order to actually give your child an education of your choice that's going to fit your life.
So beautiful. There's so many tools out there. And I think for the parents, you know, put our ego aside and our pride and ask for help, because we're all trying to figure this out. Guess what? The teachers in school are trying to figure out how to do it virtually. Everyone's trying to figure this out. So, just put your ego aside and raise your hand and say, I don't know how to do this. Please help me. And there's so many beautiful people out there like yourself that are an expert in your space.
Yeah.
Um, that parents can lean on, especially in times like these. I mean, there's all kinds of resources I could give you. I actually give resources at the back of each chapter
Okay.
uh,
Cool.
for the listeners there, um, in each one of those categories. So wherever you need help, I'd be happy to also
Thank
do
you.
follow-up call as well.
Thank you so much for coming in today and sharing all your wisdom and your advice. It's incredible. It's going to save a lot of people's life. I can tell you
Oh,
that. I can tell you that, because
oh,
it's COVID time, right? It's not normal time, right? It's different.
yeah.
Every part of us have been affected.
Yeah. So for around that, and to wrap up, it's either a crisis or an opportunity. And for the people that are dealing with health crisis right now, I think, to be candid with you guys, I think we just got tested for COVID, my whole family. So I'm very compassionate and empathetic about that, but it's either a crisis or an opportunity. So while we take care of our health, if we're moving through that, if you've lost a loved one to that, which we have through COVID,
Mhm.
my deepest condolences and prayers for you. But realize there's always beauty to come out of it, a beautiful lesson to come out of all of this or any of this, whether call it COVID. I mean, you fill in the blank. I mean, there's always a crisis, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I think, attitude is so, so important. And sometimes that's a lot easier said than done if you're dealing with it directly. But I think we're all smart enough to know that things happen for a reason.
Yes. Yes. Always it does.
Yeah.
Just us have to figure it out. It comes later.
Yeah.
What's the story behind it comes later. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Kohil. And thank you for taking the time and the energy to create the platform for parents. You have a beautiful energy, and I'm sure your expertise in math and numbers, which is a very, very critical component of learning,
Thank you.
it's so important out there. So thank you.